Right then, how else would you put it? Because that's what scientists teach. That is the theory. Scientifically, they say that nothing collided into nothing. Somehow, some way, what they hope, they wish, they pray that nothing smashed into nothing and created one. So it's exactly the same. 0 plus 0 equals 1. Now, that's not logically, reasonably true. You know, that's not sound. That's not. You cannot say that 0 crashed into 0 and created 1, because that's what they teach physically. Nothing collided into nothing, which is more logical. All I was saying in the past videos is that life is so beautifully constructed and arranged in such an intricate, brilliant, amazing system that you can't help but be in awe and not logically come to the reasonable conclusion that there are too many specific 10 to the 89th power, if you studied maths you know how big a number that is, probability of occurring coincidences that have occurred, resulting in everything being just right. Now, God exists outside of time, space and matter, so he's not subject to time, space and matter. I can't understand that in my little 3-pound brain, but when I get to heaven I will understand. But God is not limited to my understanding. He is infinitely, he's not hindered by time, space and matter. Now, we can't understand that because we see everything as time, space and matter, but he exists outside of time, space and matter. You believe that nothing smashed into nothing, and then over millions or billions of years somehow, it just sounds crazy, man, if you think about it logically. It's just obvious that there was a God, somebody created it, or the world made itself. Matter cannot produce itself. So we'll get to that bit later, which is the true God. And also, have you ever wondered that it denies cause and effect? What caused the Big Bang? Cause and effect. So, yeah. Okay, this might come as a shock to you moving to Montana. Are you ready? You ready? Over the centuries, no other book has been more reviled, criticized, and attacked for its accuracy other than the Bible, from every direction. But it has stood the test of time. The reality is that the Bible has been attacked for over 2,000 years, but it has stood the test of time, and it has demonstrated that it is historically accurate and reliable. You know, so this may come to you as a shock, but people attacking the Bible is nothing new moving to Montana. I just quickly forgot to rebuttal where he goes on to say that the Bible is unreliable because of the time frame gap from the original manuscripts to the copies of the original manuscripts we have. But it's unique in its survival moving to Montana because in ancient times books were copied by hand onto manuscripts which were made from parchment and would decay over time. Ancient books are available today only because someone made copies of the originals to preserve them. For example, the original writings of Julius Caesar are no longer around. We know that he only wrote by the copies we have. Only 10 copies still exist, and they were made 1,000 years after he died. Only 600 copies of Homer's The Iliad exist, made 1,300 years after the originals were written. No other book has as many copies of ancient manuscripts as the Bible. In fact, there are over 24,000 copies of New Testament manuscripts, some written within 30 years of the writer's death. So there's only a gap of 30 years, which dwarfs any other historic ancient work of antiquity. So if you can't trust the reliability of just say 30 years of the Bible, you cannot trust any other historical document. It doesn't even come close to that. Close, nowhere near. Right, I apologise because I might speak a little bit fast now, but I have to speak fast to get through his main points because the video's taking a bit longer than I thought it would do. But right, you do realise that you haven't done your homework, and we don't have just religious historical historians. We have 9 secular non-Christian sources that mention Jesus, not just Josephus within 100 years of his death. Josephus, the Jewish historian, Tacitus, the Roman historian, Pliny the Younger, a politician of Rome, Phlegon, a freed slave who wrote histories, Lucian, the Greek satirist, Celsius, a Roman philosopher, and probably historians Septimius and Thallus, as well as the prisoner Merabar Seprabun. In all, at least, we have 42 authors, 9 of them secular, mention Jesus. We have Tiberius Caesar was the Roman emperor at the time of Jesus' ministry and execution. Tiberius is mentioned by 10 sources within 100 years of his death. Tacitus, Sentinus, Velius, Petrarchus, Portale, Seneca, Valerius, Maximus, Josephus, and Luke compared to Jesus 42 total sources in the same length of time. That's more than 40 times the number of total sources who mention the Roman emperor during roughly the same period. If we only considered the numbers of secular non-Christian sources who mention Jesus and Tiberius within 150 years of their lives, we arrive at a tie of 9 of each. If you insist that these writers, Pliny the Younger, Tacitus, Septimius, the testimonies are invalid simply because they were not eyewitnesses, then we should throw out most of ancient history. Besides the fact, eyewitnesses' accounts are recorded in the Bible. If you have to be an eyewitness in order to give an accurate account of history, then no one could write a text today providing the history of the American Civil War, and indeed much of what we know historically would be discarded.
If he came to this planet to reveal himself, why did he choose to do so in such a secretive way that leaves behind exactly the same lack of hard evidence that we typically have for personages of myth?
Oh, okay then, ask yourself, how can a carpenter, just as a normal everyday carpenter, 2,000 years ago, have such a profound effect all around the world within the space of 2,000 years? If he was just a man, he was either a raving lunatic, or he was actually God in the flesh, and he did the things that are written in them book, because no other person could have a profound effect around the world like he did. And it's all recorded through history. And you're saying it's a myth. Oh, a myth. There's no historian alive that would deny the authenticity of historical events that took place in history, such as Plato's textologies, Caesar's Gallic Wars, all that stuff. But yet we have thousands upon thousands of manuscripts, evidence that dwarf any ancient work of antiquity. For example, some of the ones I previously mentioned. So I would very much argue that the events that took place 2,000 years ago during the Roman Empire, which I might add, are very much far from myth. Moving to Montana. Plus, we also have real archaeological, historical cities and towns and villages that still exist to this day. This is not myths and tales and fairy tales. You can go and check this stuff out. And you say God revealed himself in a secret way. Okay, listen. If just 10 people today were picked who were from the same place, born around the same time, spoke the same language and made about the same amount of money, and were asked to write on just one controversial subject, they would have trouble agreeing with each other. Agree? But the Bible stands alone. It was written over a period of 1,600 years by more than 40 writers from all walks of life. Some were fishermen, politicians, others were generals, kings, shepherds, historians. They are from 3 different continents and wrote in 3 different languages. They wrote on hundreds of controversial subjects, and yet they agreed with harmony. They wrote in dungeons, temples, on beaches, on hillsides, during peacetime, during wartime, yet their words sound like they came from the same source. So even though 10 people today couldn't write one controversial subject and agree, God picked 40 different people to write the Bible, and it stands the test of time. The invention of the printing press in 1450 made it possible to print books in large quantities. The first book printed to be ever printed was the Bible. Since then, the Bible has been read by more people and printed more times, no other than the book in history. By 1930, over 1 billion Bibles had been distributed. 200 million Bibles each year in 1977, and the number doesn't include many other Bible publishers. No one who is interested in knowing the truth can ignore such an important book. The Bible has been translated into over 1,400 languages. No other book even comes close.
You seem to be aiming your criticisms at all atheists, which I'm actually beginning to slowly get an idea of why this is. It's because of this misunderstanding of what the definition of the word atheist means.
Atheist means you don't believe in God at this time, but are open to interpretation. But until you are shown hard, solid evidence or proof of God, then you will remain tilting towards the evolution side of explaining how we came to be. I label you atheist because you deny the existence of a creator, such as creation, his 44-letter love book to you, your conscience, prophecy, the moral compass upon your heart, and Christians who have experienced God.
Then that's fine. But by labelling people atheistic because they choose to rely more heavily on the vast wealth of evidence than they do upon the Bronze Age conjecture.
Vast amount of evidence, let's examine it. The test of any theory is whether or not it can provide answers to basic questions. Some well-meaning but misguided people think evolution is a reasonable enough theory to explain man's questions about the universe. It's not fact, it's theory. Where did the space for the universe come from? Where did matter come from? Where did the laws of the universe come from? How did matter get so perfectly organized? Where did the energy come from to do all the organizing? Where, why and how did life come from dead matter? When, where, why and how did life learn to reproduce itself? How can mutations, recombining of the genetic code, create any new improved varieties? Recombining English letters will never produce Chinese books. Is it possible that similarities in design between animals prove a common creator instead of a common ancestor? Natural selection only works with the genetic information available and tends only to keep a species stable. How would you explain the increasing complexity in the genetic code that must have occurred if evolution were true? When, where, why and how did single-cell plants become multi-cell plants? When, where, why and how did single-celled animals evolve? When, where, why and how did fish change to amphibians? Amphibians changed to reptiles. Reptiles changed to birds. When, where, why and how did these things happen? Please present your vast amount of evidence.